Guys, do not mate on age. People ask on Facebook that what's the age should I mate them, and it's anything from 6, 7, 8, 5, and so on. But most guys, they look at the age, but at 6 months, most guys' pigs are this size still. They barely pork weight, and then they mate them. Why is it important to mate on weight, not on age? Okay, guys, as I said, size matters. If the piggy is this size, her womb is this size, you cannot fit 15 babies in it, first thing. Secondly, she hasn't got the reserves on her back to milk from. Remember, she cannot eat enough. There's not enough space in the room, and of that size, the stomach is smaller as well. She cannot eat enough to not lose weight during lactation. But you've got to minimize it. So you've got to feed her ad lib. Ad lib, guys, means as much as they can eat, as they will eat freely, and so on. So a gilt needs to be at least 120 kilos before you even think about mating her. Then when she comes on heat, if you fed her properly, she won't come on heat before then either, and so on. Once she comes on heat, don't just mate her the first time that she comes around. Mate on the third heat. Why is that? There's an economic advantage in waiting for the second, third heat. Why? Because their hormones, look, the first heat, this is the first time it's happened, that the hormone system isn't working properly, it's new, she doesn't know what's going on, she's stressed out of her mind, she eats half the babies and so on. Her hormone system isn't developed yet. Often they come on heat the first time, and they're on heat, but they don't ovulate, so they can't get pregnant. But if you do mate them on that first heat, you can if they do get pregnant, you can expect 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 babies if you're lucky. Second heat, you're looking at 7, 8, 9, 10 maybe. If you wait for the third heat, you can get 12, 13, 14 born alive, I'm talking about now. Okay, so there is an economic advantage in waiting for the third heat, and so on. But now, you've mated her at 120. She has had 2 cycles, so the system is working, that everything is now running, everything knowing where to go, and so on. The third thing is, she's now got some reserves on her back to milk from. She's that much bigger and so on. So what I'm saying, guys, is puberty is not the same as sexual maturity. A woman, a girl, can get pregnant at 10. Why aren't we getting girls at 10 years old pregnant? Because they're not sexually mature, and so on. So there's a difference between sexual maturity and puberty. So mate them when they're sexually mature. Now, for sexual maturity, there's 4 things that you need to have. All of them, not some of them. The first thing is at least 120. The second one is have at least 16 millimeters of back fat. Now, a lot of guys, especially from the breeding companies, when they sell you boars, they have sire lines, which is selected on fast growth, lean growth, big muscling, and so on. When they breed gilts for sale, they have totally different selection criteria. I sold gilts to a lady in Labatsi and so on, and another pig farmer went there and he said, no, those gilts are fat. I said to her, do you want a gilt that looks like a bodybuilder with that much back fat going into lactation, or do you want somebody with a bit of back fat reserves to go into lactation? I said, okay, that makes sense. Minimum 16 millimeters. Now, you do get things to measure that and so on. You won't have them, they cost a bit of money. Right age, it's sort of 7.5 months, between 6 and 7.5. Right weight, enough back fat, and having 3 cycles already. Now, the other thing is that often with the first cycle, what happens is, because everything isn't working, it's not going, and so on, is that she comes on heat once, you mate her, tomorrow she's off. So by the third one, she'll stay on heat for 24 hours, and so on. Everything is working properly. So you need all those things in place before you mate her. Now, why 120, guys? Now, 120, most guys say, oh, we never even get them to 120. Why must I wait for 120? The thing is, after you've mated her, You cannot now put on weight. People think, yeah, I mated her at 70 kilos, I'll put that extra weight on in the next 115 days before she farrows. Guys, there's a negative correlation between feeding after mating in the early pregnancy and appetite during lactation. That's a proven negative correlation. What does that mean? I mean, if you feed it too much in early lactation, first trimester, ladies, you know what I'm talking about, then they will eat less during lactation when they need that amount of food and so on. So if you overfeed them now, if you're trying to gain weight and feeding them more, she's going to eat less in lactation, she's going to drop weight like a rock. You won't get her pregnant for 2 or 3 cycles afterwards. You're losing money all the way to the bank and so on. That is why you've got to wait for that sexual maturity before you mate her.
Well, what's the number of days roughly between each cycles?
90% of my sows, if I wean them on a Thursday morning, Monday morning they're on. Now, so is that what you're asking here? Sorry, Brian?
And if you can keep them for the third
Yeah.
what's the time period between each?
21 days.
21.
Yeah.
You need to record it as well.
Yeah. So the 21-day heat period and so on the pigs.
How often do they go on the cycle?
Oh,
Yeah. So after the first puberty, every 21 days they'll come on. Guys, pigs does not come on heat while they're lactating. Cows do. That you've got a cow who's calf at foot and drinking milk, and 2.5 months later, if you want to calf the same time every year, 2.5 months later she's still giving milk to the calf, but she's getting pregnant. Doesn't work like that in pigs. They cannot come on heat while they're lactating. So the day that when you wean her, that sets off the next cycle. Everything starts revving up, and we'll talk about feeding levels during that whole cycle a bit further on as well.